Ben Mitchell wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished organizing the medical supplies in Storage Bay 7. The trade station Haven's Rest was always busy, but today felt especially hectic. Ships from 12 different species had docked within the past 6 hours, each bringing their own cargo, customs, and complications. As the station's chief medical officer, Ben had learned to expect the unexpected. In his 3 years aboard Haven's Rest, he had treated everything from Thorian scale rot to Vexian neural fatigue. The neutral station served as a meeting point for peaceful trade between species that might otherwise never interact, and Ben loved the challenge of keeping everyone healthy and happy. He sealed the last container of emergency bandages and checked his tablet. The inventory was complete and his shift was technically over. Most of the medical staff had already gone to their quarters for rest period, but Ben never minded staying late. The station's medical bay was his second home, and he took pride in keeping it running perfectly. A low rumbling sound echoed through the storage bay, followed by a metallic crash that made Ben jump. He frowned and looked toward the ceiling. The noise had come from somewhere above, probably near the main docking ring. Station maintenance would handle it, but something about the sound bothered him. Ben gathered his tools and headed toward the exit, but another crash stopped him in his tracks. This time he heard something else mixed with the metallic clanging. It sounded almost like crying, but higher pitched than any human child would make. His medical training kicked in immediately. Someone was hurt and they were scared. Ben dropped his tool bag and ran toward the source of the sound, following the emergency access ladders that led to the upper docking levels. The crying grew louder as he climbed. By the time he reached docking bay 12, Ben could tell the sound was coming from a small being, probably very young. His heart raced as he pushed through the heavy doors and entered the bay. What he saw made him gasp. A massive cargo container had toppled over, crushing several smaller containers beneath it. Shipping crates were scattered across the floor, and a thick cloud of dust hung in the air. But Ben's attention focused immediately on a small figure trapped beneath a fallen beam near the far wall. The child was unlike any species Ben had seen before. Its skin was a beautiful azure blue that seemed to shimmer in the bay's artificial lighting. Intricate crystalline markings covered its arms and face, pulsing with a soft inner light. The child appeared to be around 6 or 7 years old in human terms, though Ben knew that age comparisons between species were often meaningless. The beam pinning the child's leg was not enormously heavy, but it was clearly causing pain. The little one was crying in a musical language Ben didn't recognize, and its crystalline markings were flashing rapidly in what seemed like distress signals. Ben approached carefully, speaking in the calmest voice he could manage. "Hey there, little one. My name is Ben. I'm here to help you." The child looked up with large silver eyes that were filled with tears. It said something in its musical language, then tried to speak in standard galactic common. "Hurt, leg hurt. Cannot move. I know, sweetheart. I'm going to get you out of there." Ben knelt down and examined the situation. The beam was made of lightweight composite material, designed for easy handling during cargo operations. He could lift it, but he needed to be careful not to cause more injury. As Ben positioned himself to lift the beam, the child spoke again. "You not Zalari. You not family. Cannot touch." Ben paused. He had heard of the Zalari before, though he had never met one personally. They were known throughout the galaxy as a proud warrior species with complex social customs. Many species had strict rules about physical contact, especially involving their young. "I understand," Ben said gently, "but you're hurt and I'm a doctor. I take care of people when they're hurt. That's what I do." The child's markings pulsed more slowly as it considered this. "Doctor?" "Yes, a healer. I fix hurt things and make them better." The little Zalari nodded slowly. "Mama says healers are good." "Healers help, that's right. Now I need to lift this beam off your leg. It might hurt a little when I move it, but then you'll be free. Can you be brave for me?" The child nodded again, gripping a small crystalline pendant that hung around its neck. Ben carefully positioned his hands under the beam and lifted with his legs, just as he had been taught in emergency response training. The composite material was heavier than it looked, but manageable. As soon as the beam was clear, Ben could see the extent of the injury. The child's leg was badly bruised and possibly fractured, but there was no sign of major bleeding or bone breaking through the skin. Ben had seen much worse injuries, and this one was definitely treatable. Okay, that's the hard part over, Ben said, setting the beam aside safely. Now I need to check your leg and make sure you're okay. Is that all right with you? The child hesitated for a moment, then nodded. You help, like healer should. Ben knelt beside the young Zalari and gently examined the injured leg. His medical scanner confirmed what his eyes had told him. A hairline fracture in the lower bone, significant bruising but no major damage. With proper treatment, the child would heal completely within a few weeks. The good news is that your leg is going to be just fine, Ben said with a smile, but we need to get you to the medical bay so I can fix it properly. The problem is that you shouldn't walk on it right now. Would it be okay if I carried you? The child's eyes went wide. Carry, but you not family. You not sworn protector. Is not allowed. Ben felt his heart sink. He understood the importance of respecting cultural boundaries, but this was a medical emergency. I know your customs are important, he said carefully. But you're hurt, and the medical bay is far from here. I promise I will be very gentle and respectful. I only want to help you get better. The young Zalari stared at him for a long moment, its crystalline markings pulsing in what Ben hoped was thoughtful consideration rather than alarm. Finally, it spoke in a small voice. You have healer eyes, kind eyes. Mama says trust people with kind eyes. Your mama sounds very wise. She is princess. Very important. But she says kind eyes more important than important titles. Ben blinked in surprise. A princess? He was dealing with Zalari royalty? The political implications of this situation suddenly seemed much more complex. But looking at the injured child, Ben realized that politics didn't matter. A hurt child was a hurt child, regardless of their family status. Well then, Your Highness, Ben said with a gentle smile. Shall we get you to the medical bay? The child giggled despite its pain. I am Davi, not Your Highness. Mama is Your Highness. Nice to meet you, Davy. I'm Ben. He carefully scooped the child into his arms, supporting the injured leg with extra care. Davy was lighter than Ben had expected, and the crystalline markings on its skin felt warm and smooth against his hands. The journey to the medical bay took nearly 10 minutes, and Ben was amazed by how curious Davi was despite the injury. The young Zalari asked questions about everything they passed, the corridor lighting systems, the various alien plants in the station's garden sections, and the different species they encountered along the way. Why do humans walk so slowly? Davi asked as they passed a group of Thorian traders. We don't walk slowly, Ben laughed. We just don't need to hurry all the time. Sometimes it's nice to take time to look around and enjoy things. Zalari always hurry. Mama says we must be strong and fast. Being strong and fast is good, Ben agreed. But being kind and gentle is good too. Different species have different strengths. By the time they reached the medical bay, Davi seemed to have forgotten about the pain in its leg. The child was fascinated by the medical equipment and asked Ben to explain every device they passed. Ben placed Davy carefully on an examination table and began gathering the supplies he would need. This is going to tickle a little, he warned as he activated the bone regeneration unit. The healing process was remarkably fast, thanks to the advanced medical technology available on Haven's Rest. Within 20 minutes, Davy's leg was completely healed and the child was bouncing excitedly on the examination table. I can walk again. It doesn't hurt. Davy jumped down from the table and ran in circles around the medical bay. You fixed me. You really are a healer. Ben was grinning at the child's enthusiasm when the medical bay doors burst open with a loud hiss. Several figures in elaborate armor stormed into the room, followed by a tall, elegant Zalari woman wearing flowing robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. The woman's crystalline markings were far more complex than Davy's, covering most of her visible skin in intricate patterns that pulsed with deep blue and silver light. Her silver eyes were fierce and intense, and when she saw Ben standing near her child, those eyes filled with something that looked very much like anger. Step away from my son immediately, the woman commanded in accented but perfect galactic common. Her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. Ben raised his hands and took a step back, his mind racing. This was clearly Davy's mother, the princess the child had mentioned. And judging by her expression and the armed guards flanking her, Ben had just created a major diplomatic incident. Mama, Davy ran toward the princess, moving perfectly on the leg that had been injured just minutes before. Look, the healer fixed my leg. It doesn't hurt anymore. The princess caught her son in her arms, but her eyes never left Ben's face. How dare you touch a member of the royal family without permission? Do you have any idea what you have done? Ben felt his mouth go dry. Your Highness, I apologize if I've offended you. Your son was trapped under a fallen beam in the docking bay. His leg was injured and he needed medical attention. I was only trying to help. Only trying to help. The princess's voice rose dangerously. You have violated our most sacred laws. No one may touch a Zalari child except family members or sworn protectors. One of the armored guards stepped forward, hand moving toward what was clearly a weapon. Ben's heart hammered in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was exactly the kind of cultural misunderstanding that Haven's Rest was supposed to prevent. Mama, stop! Davy wriggled out of his mother's arms and ran to stand between Ben and the guards. He helped me. My leg was broken and I was scared, and he made it better. The princess stared down at her son, then looked back at Ben. For the first time since entering the medical bay, her expression showed something other than anger. What did you say? Your leg was broken? The beam was heavy and it hurt so much, Davy explained, his musical voice trembling slightly at the memory. I called for help, but no one came. Then Ben found me and lifted the beam and carried me here and fixed my leg. The princess knelt down to examine her son more closely, running her hands over the leg that had been injured. Her crystalline markings pulsed more slowly as she realized there was no sign of damage whatsoever. This is impossible, she whispered. Our healers told me it would take weeks for your leg to mend properly. The medical officer said the fracture was too severe for immediate treatment. Ben has special healing machines, Davy said proudly. And he has kind eyes. You always say to trust people with kind eyes. The princess stood slowly and looked at Ben with an expression he couldn't quite read. You are the human who treated my son? Yes, Your Highness. I'm Ben Mitchell, Chief Medical Officer for Haven's Rest. And you carried him here? Through the station corridors? In full view of anyone who might have seen? Ben nodded, feeling increasingly nervous about where this conversation was heading. He couldn't walk on the injured leg. I know it was against your customs, but it was a medical emergency. I couldn't leave him trapped and hurt. The princess was quiet for a long moment, studying Ben's face with those intense silver eyes. Around them, the medical bay was completely silent except for the soft humming of the life support systems. Finally, she spoke. In our culture, there are only two types of people who may touch a Zalari child. Family members who are bound by blood and love, and sworn protectors who are bound by honor and duty to guard that child's life above their own. Ben swallowed hard. I understand, Your Highness. I didn't mean to disrespect your customs. I was only thinking about Davy's medical needs. You carried my son through this station without thought for your own safety or political consequences. You used your advanced medicine to heal him completely, when our own healers said it was impossible, and you asked for nothing in return. I don't need anything in return, Ben said honestly. Taking care of people who are hurt is what I do. It's who I am. The princess stepped closer to Ben, and he could see that her crystalline markings were now pulsing with warm golden light instead of the cold blue anger from before. By our laws, only a sworn protector would do what you have done. Only someone bound by sacred duty would risk political consequences to save a child they had never met. She placed her hand over her heart, in what Ben recognized as a formal Zalari gesture. I am Princess Kira of the Third Stellar House, daughter of the Crystal Throne, guardian of the Outer Worlds. Ben wasn't sure how to respond to such a formal introduction, so he simply nodded respectfully. Princess Kira continued, her voice taking on a ceremonial tone that echoed through the medical bay. Ben Mitchell of Earth, Chief Healer of Haven's Rest, you have proven yourself to be a true protector through your actions. You carried my injured child to safety when he could not walk. You healed him when others said it was impossible. You asked for nothing and gave everything. She reached into her robes and withdrew a small crystalline pendant similar to the one Davy wore, but far more elaborate. The crystal seemed to contain its own inner light, pulsing gently with rainbow colors. By the ancient laws of my people, I name you Kethmar, sacred protector of Prince Davy. From this moment forward, you are bound to our family by honor and trust. You have earned the right to touch and protect my son as if he were your own blood. Ben stared at the pendant in shock. Around the medical bay, he could hear the Zalari guards making sounds of amazement. Apparently, this was not something that happened every day. Your Highness, I'm honored, but I don't think I understand what this means. Princess Kira smiled for the first time since entering the medical bay, and the expression transformed her face completely. It means, Ben Mitchell, that you have given my family the greatest gift possible. You have shown us that true protection comes not from duty or obligation, but from the simple desire to help others. She placed the pendant around Ben's neck, and immediately he felt a warm, tingling sensation as the crystal seemed to attune itself to his heartbeat. It means, said a small voice from behind them, that you're my protector now. Forever and always. Ben looked down to see Davy grinning up at him with pure joy. Without thinking, Ben knelt down and hugged the young Zalari, marveling at how natural it felt now that he had permission. As he held the child who had changed his life in the span of a single afternoon, Ben realized that sometimes the most important moments came from the simplest choices. He had chosen to help an injured child, and somehow that choice had connected him to an entire family across the stars. Princess Kira watched them with tears in her silver eyes, and Ben knew that this was only the beginning of something wonderful. 3 weeks had passed since Ben Mitchell became Prince Davy's sacred protector, and life aboard Haven's Rest had changed in ways he never could have imagined. The crystalline pendant around his neck had become as familiar as his medical scanner, pulsing gently with warm light whenever Davy was nearby. Ben was reviewing patient files in his office when the familiar sound of running footsteps echoed through the medical bay corridors. Before he could look up, Prince Davy burst through the door with his usual boundless energy. Ben, you have to come see this." The young Zalari was practically bouncing with excitement, his crystalline markings flashing in rapid patterns that Ben had learned meant pure joy. "What's got you so excited, little prince?" Ben asked, saving his work and giving Davy his full attention. Over the past few weeks, he had discovered that Davy's enthusiasm was infectious and that the child's curiosity led to some of the most interesting discoveries on the station. The new ship that docked this morning has creatures from the Andorian system, real living creatures that change colors. Tom from the docking crew said they're called chameleon lizards, but they're as big as my arm. Ben chuckled. Tom was one of the human maintenance workers who had quickly become one of Davy's favorite people to visit. The gruff engineer had a soft spot for the young prince and never seemed to mind answering endless questions about how the station worked. "That does sound pretty amazing," Ben agreed. "But you know the rules about visiting the cargo bays without permission." Davy's expression fell slightly, but he nodded. Since becoming Ben's protected charge, the young prince had been learning about station safety protocols. Princess Kira had made it clear that Davy needed to understand the rules of living aboard Haven's Rest if he was going to spend time there. "I asked Tom if we could go see them together, but he said I needed to ask you first because you're my protector now." The word still felt strange to Ben, even after 3 weeks. Being named Kethamar had brought responsibilities he was still learning to understand. Princess Kira had explained that the role was both simpler and more complex than human concepts of guardianship. A protector watches over the physical and spiritual well-being of their charge, she had told him, during one of their long conversations about Zalari culture. But more than that, a protector helps shape the character and wisdom of the one they guard. You are not just keeping Davy safe, Ben. You are helping him become the leader he will one day need to be. "All right," Ben said, standing up and grabbing his medical kit out of habit. "Let's go see these color-changing lizards. But we follow all safety protocols and we stay with Tom the whole time." Davy's joy returned instantly, and he grabbed Ben's hand as they left the medical bay. The casual physical contact still amazed Ben sometimes. In Zalari culture, such familiarity was reserved for the closest family members, yet Davy seemed to consider him exactly that now. They found Tom in Cargo Bay 5, supervising the unloading of several large environmental containers. The veteran engineer looked up as they approached and grinned at Davy's obvious excitement. "There's my favorite little engineer," Tom said, wiping grease from his hands. "I figured you'd be by as soon as Ben gave you permission." "Ben said we could look at the lizards if we follow safety rules," Davy announced proudly. "Smart man. You're a protector." Tom nodded approvingly at Ben. "These particular critters are harmless, but it's always good to be careful around unknown species." Tom led them to a series of transparent containers that had been set up near the bay's environmental controls. Inside each container, Ben could see several lizard-like creatures about the size of house cats. As they watched, the creatures shifted through an amazing array of colors: deep blues, vibrant greens, soft purples, and brilliant golds. They change colors based on their emotions and their environment, Tom explained. The trader who brought them says they're incredibly intelligent and empathic. They can actually sense the moods of other beings nearby. Davy pressed his face against the nearest container, his crystalline markings pulsing with fascination. Look, Ben. That one turned the same color as my markings. Ben looked closer and saw that one of the lizards had indeed shifted to a soft blue that perfectly matched Davy's skin tone. The creature was looking directly at the young prince with large, intelligent eyes. That's remarkable, Ben murmured. I've never seen adaptive camouflage that responsive to other species. Gets better, Tom said with a grin. Watch this. He moved closer to one of the containers and began speaking in gentle, soothing tones. The lizard inside gradually shifted to warm gold and green colors, and its posture became relaxed and calm. Davy was enchanted. Can I try, please? Ben looked at Tom, who nodded. Should be safe enough. They seemed to respond well to peaceful intentions. Davy moved to a different container and began speaking to the lizard inside in his musical Zalari language. Ben couldn't understand the words, but the tone was gentle and welcoming. The lizard immediately responded, its colors shifting to match the warm golden hues that appeared in Davy's markings when he was happy. Amazing, Ben breathed. It's like they're having a conversation. Maybe they are, said a familiar voice behind them. Ben turned to see Princess Kira entering the cargo bay, flanked by two of her guards. She had been spending more time on the station lately, claiming it was for diplomatic reasons, but Ben suspected she simply enjoyed being near her son. Your Highness, Tom said, giving a respectful nod. We were just showing Prince Davy the new arrivals. Princess Kira moved to stand beside her son, watching as he continued his interaction with the color-changing lizard. The Andorian empathic lizards are considered sacred by some species, she said thoughtfully. They say these creatures can see into the hearts of other beings and reflect their true nature. As if responding to her words, the lizard in front of Davy suddenly shifted to a brilliant rainbow of colors that pulsed in perfect synchronization with the young prince's crystalline markings. Both child and creature seemed completely absorbed in their silent communication. That's new, Tom said quietly. I've never seen one do that before. Princess Kira placed her hand gently on Davy's shoulder. What do you see, my son? Davy looked up at her with wonder in his silver eyes. It's showing me feelings, Mama. Happy feelings, curious feelings, lonely feelings. It wants to understand everyone around it, just like I do. Ben felt his heart skip a beat. In that simple statement, Davy had perfectly described the empathy and curiosity that made him such a special child. The lizard had somehow recognized and reflected those qualities. Your Highness, Ben said quietly, I think this creature is responding to Davy's natural empathic abilities. Some humans have similar gifts, but I've never seen anything quite like this. Princess Kira studied Ben's face carefully. You believe my son has a special connection to other living beings? I think he has the gift of understanding others, Ben replied. Not just their words, but their emotions and needs. It's part of what makes him so eager to help and learn from everyone he meets. As they watched, more of the lizards in the nearby containers began shifting their colors to match the rainbow pattern of the first one. Soon the entire cargo bay was filled with gentle, pulsing light as dozens of creatures responded to Davy's presence. Incredible, Princess Kira whispered. They're all reacting to him. Davy turned to look at the adults around him, confusion evident on his young face. They're not just reacting to me, he said simply. They're reacting to all of us. They can feel that we care about each other. Ben felt a strange sensation in his chest, like his heart was expanding. In his work as a doctor, he had seen many examples of interspecies cooperation and friendship. But this was something entirely different. This was a child who could somehow sense and strengthen the emotional bonds between different beings. Davy, Ben said gently, how long have you been able to feel what others are feeling? The young prince shrugged as if it was the most natural thing in the universe. Always, can't everyone? You feel worried about people before they even know they're sick. Mama feels proud and scared at the same time when she watches me. Tom feels happy when he explains how things work. Ben exchanged glances with Princess Kira, seeing his own amazement reflected in her silver eyes. They had been thinking of Davy as a bright, curious child, but perhaps he was much more than that. Your Highness, Ben said carefully, has anyone in your family ever shown abilities like this before? Princess Kira was quiet for a long moment, watching her son continue his wordless communication with the empathic lizards. There are legends, she said finally. Stories of ancient Zalari who could bridge the gaps between different species and bring peace through understanding. We call them the Harmony Singers, but they're just myths, stories told to children. Maybe they weren't myths, Ben suggested quietly. Before Princess Kira could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the cargo bay. The station's emergency alert system activated, and a voice echoed through the speakers. Medical emergency in Sector 7. All available medical personnel report to Sector 7 immediately. This is not a drill. Ben's training kicked in instantly. I have to go, he said, already moving toward the exit. Tom, can you make sure Davy gets safely back to his quarters? Wait, Davy called out, running after Ben. I want to help too. Davy, you're not trained for medical emergencies, Ben said gently but firmly. It could be dangerous, but I might be able to help in other ways, the young prince insisted. If people are scared or hurt, maybe I can help them feel better while you take care of their injuries. Ben paused, torn between his protective instincts and his growing understanding of Davy's unique abilities. He looked to Princess Kira for guidance. My son has already shown that he has gifts beyond the ordinary, she said thoughtfully. Perhaps it is time for him to learn how to use them to help others. But, she added with the firm tone of a mother, he stays close to you at all times, and if you judge the situation too dangerous, he leaves immediately. Ben nodded, understanding the responsibility she was placing on him. All right, Davy, but you follow my instructions exactly no matter what. Deal? Deal, Davy said solemnly, though his crystalline markings were already pulsing with excitement. They rushed through the station corridors toward Sector 7, Princess Kira and her guards following close behind. As they reached the emergency site, Ben could see the problem immediately. A section of the station's outer hull had suffered a minor breach, causing a temporary loss of atmosphere in one of the residential modules. Several families from different species had been evacuated to the emergency shelter, and many of them appeared to be in various states of distress. Ben quickly began triaging the injured while his medical team set up equipment. Most of the injuries were minor: cuts from flying debris, respiratory irritation from temporary oxygen loss, and bruises from the rapid evacuation. But the emotional trauma was more significant, especially among the children who didn't understand what had happened. As Ben worked on treating a Thorian trader's injured arm, he heard Davy's musical voice speaking softly nearby. The young prince had positioned himself near a group of frightened alien children and was somehow managing to communicate with all of them, despite the language barriers. Ben glanced over and was amazed by what he saw. The children from 4 different species were all gathered around Davy, their various forms of distress calming visibly as he spoke to them. Whatever he was saying or doing, it was working better than any sedative Ben had ever used. How is he doing that? Asked Dr. Sarah Wells, one of Ben's human colleagues who had arrived to help with the emergency. I think he's somehow projecting feelings of safety and calm, Ben replied, watching in fascination as Davy gently touched each child's hand or arm. It's like he's sharing his own sense of peace with them. An hour later, when the emergency was fully under control and the hull breach had been repaired, Ben found himself sitting in the station's main garden with Davy and Princess Kira. The young prince was exhausted from his first real test as a helper, but he was also glowing with satisfaction. You did something really special today, Ben told him. You helped those children feel safe when they were scared. That's a gift not everyone has. It felt good to help, Davy said simply. When I saw how frightened they were, I just wanted to share some of the safe feelings I have when I'm with you and Mama. Princess Kira reached over and stroked her son's head tenderly. You did well, my brave boy, but using your gifts like that must have been tiring. Davy nodded sleepily. A little, but Ben says that's normal when you're learning to do new things. Right, Ben? That's exactly right, Ben agreed. And I think you've learned enough for one day. How about we get you back to your quarters for some rest? As they walked through the peaceful corridors of Haven's Rest, Ben reflected on how much his life had changed since that day in the cargo bay when he first found Davy trapped and injured. He had gained not just a title and responsibilities, but a family that transcended species boundaries. Ben, Princess Kira said quietly, as they reached the Zalari diplomatic quarters. I want to thank you again for what you've given us. I should be thanking you, Ben replied. Devi has taught me more about compassion and understanding in 3 weeks than I learned in years of medical training. Princess Kira smiled, her crystalline markings pulsing with warm affection. Perhaps that's why the universe brought you together. You needed to learn about the power of empathy, and he needed to learn how to use his gifts to heal others. As Ben tucked Devi into bed that night, a privilege he never would have imagined having with alien royalty, the young prince looked up at him with sleepy silver eyes. Ben, will you teach me more about being a healer? I want to help people the way you do. I'll teach you everything I can, Ben promised. But remember, you already have the most important part of being a healer. What's that? A heart that wants to help others feel better. Davy smiled and closed his eyes, the crystalline pendant around Ben's neck pulsing gently in rhythm with the child's peaceful breathing. As Ben quietly left the room, he knew that his role as protector was just beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help others, and new ways for a human doctor and a young alien prince to bridge the gaps between different worlds, and Ben couldn't wait to see what they would discover together.